Bridge USA, let's get on our feet and give a very warm welcome to our co-hosts of today's conversation, a Starting Point co-founders and actors, Chris Evans and Mark Kassen.
How you doing? Hey, everybody. How are ya? Thank you. We're here for you guys.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you. So great to see everybody. We are so happy to be here to do this conversation, this bipartisan conversation with The Hill. We are especially excited to be here with Bridge USA. We love Bridge. I think 4 years ago is when we first started working with you all. You had 20 chapters, I believe, across the country, across college campuses, and you now have over 60 and 17 in high schools. It's incredibly inspiring. It's incredibly amazing. It's why we're so inspired to keep partnering with you on our common mission to uplift civil discourse and engagement amongst young folks around the country.
Yeah, we started ASP 4 years ago now with the goal of creating a civic engagement platform to try and help demystify some issues specifically for young folks like you. We're very excited today to have Illinois Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi and former Congressman Peter Roskam to have a discussion with you folks about civic engagement.
Yeah, really excited. And I know that you all know that this conversation is really important right now. In this time, we can all agree that the tenor around political discourse and the heat could really use to come down a bunch. And to that end, we are really excited to have this talk around the culture of communication in politics and an exchange of different ideas and sort of being able to listen and learn a little bit and not just shout at each other the way a lot of other folks do. To that end, we are going to bring on Michael Schell from The Hill, who's going to help lead our conversation. Michael? Good to see you. Chris and I are going to go take off, and we'll come back and do a Q&A with all of you when you're done.
We're very excited to have everyone here today. We've got a fantastic panel coming up. Former congressman, current congressman, going to talk about civic engagement, young Gen Z voters. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get into it. First up, Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi. He's a Democrat from Illinois. And then we have former Congressman Peter Roskam. He was a congressman from 2017 to 2019, and he's currently the leader of the federal policy team at Baker Hostetler. So, Congressman, thanks for joining us. So I want to start off with some news of the day, but also tie it into Gen Z voters. So there's a study at Tufts University that says that 41 million members of Gen Z will be eligible to vote in 2024. Massive number, some of them right here with us. It's a large part of the electorate, and one of the big themes of this 2024 election was, well, it's two old guys who are running again. They both want to be in the White House again. Obviously, that's not the case. There's been some excitement jolted into the race on both sides. Vice President Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket for Democrats, Senator J.D. Vance, a younger face, being vice presidential nominee for Republicans. So I'm curious to ask you both, do you think that both of those selections will energize the respective party bases, and do you think they'll be effective in energizing and getting younger voters to the ballot box? Congressman, we'll start with you.
Yes, the short answer is yes, I think so. I think that especially with, yesterday I was knocking on doors in Wisconsin, and the excitement, enthusiasm, and energy is just off the charts for Kamala Harris. And I think that the next step is really to engage Gen Z folks and others on the issues that matter to them. So there's excitement and enthusiasm, but we have to talk about the issues that matter and the problems and how we would address them. So provided we could do that, I think there's going to be a turnout similar to what happened in 2020, which was a record turnout for millennials and younger voters and Gen Z folks. But I see, I see a lot of enthusiasm even among these people based on what I saw yesterday, and I think it's going to, build from here.
Congressman Roskam.
My sense is that there's a real opportunity for younger voters to have an incredible impact. And I think it's incumbent upon the candidates themselves. Once the shine wears off on new face of a candidacy, it's the responsibility of a campaign to reach out and to say, here's why what I'm talking about matters. Here's why what I'm proposing matters to you. And it's, I think, incumbent upon younger voters to really dial in on that, to say, listen, I've got, this is my future we're talking about. This is just incredibly important. So I agree with Raja that there's an excitement that's been infused into the campaign, but the excitement can be short-lived if the campaigns don't translate that into really substantive issues. And I think that that's what we're going to see over the next 100 days.
Yeah, it's the honeymoon period that both sides are hoping lasts forever. Another, keeping on the idea of current events, a few weeks ago we saw the assassination attempt on the life of former President Trump. And after that, there was this period of a little bit of unity in a sense. Both campaigns were leaning back and holding off on those really personal and bitter attacks. That, though, was short-lived, and we're now back to the political mudslinging that is so common in our politics today. So first, just if we can reflect on this political moment, is there a time in previous elections that you've seen so much breaking news and the race be shaken up in so many different ways? And second, talk about the importance of this civil discourse and this unity message, especially among young voters and on places like college campuses. Roskam.
My sense is that we would be wise to reflect back historically. There was a time, and there's a book that I commend to you called Those Angry Days. It's by an historian, Lynn O'Brien. And she writes about the time right before America went to war in the Second World War. And it was spicy, it was vitriolic, there were voices of isolationism. And it's the story of Franklin Roosevelt and Charles Lindbergh, who was a leading isolationist. And what I didn't realize was how toxic the conversation was in this country until Pearl Harbor. Now, am I suggesting that we're at that point now? No, but I think there's, it can be overwhelming sometimes, particularly if you've been born within the last 20 years to say, well, I'm completely freaking out. This is so overwhelming, I don't know how to deal with this. And I think it is incumbent upon us to say, no. Our country has been through a lot of stuff. And are we in a time where there's a lot of political turbulence? Of course we are. That's self-evident. And it's exacerbated by the pace at which we're communicating. And I'm sure we'll end up talking about this more. So I think yes, Michael, it is happening. Things are happening fast. All these events are really cascading, and they feel like they're rushing. And yet, this is not new for our country. And I think we would be wise to step back and say, okay, we can handle this, and we can make a difference here, but to recognize it and to not be intimidated by it.
Congressman?
I echo those sentiments. I think that 3 weeks ago, I think lawmakers were genuinely upset and horrified by what happened to former President Donald Trump. He was this close from no longer being with us, and I think that that's what also prompted, by the way, the bipartisan hearings with regard to the Secret Service, where I had a chance to interrogate the Secret Service director, and on a bipartisan basis, we basically asked for her resignation, and some things should be outside of the realm of partisanship, and one of them is safety. People's safety. It's one thing to talk, it's another thing to say words that could incite violence or encourage violence. And right now, we're in a moment, folks, where unfortunately there is a segment of actually both extremes that believes that they can resolve political disagreements through force. This has been shown by Robert Pape, a world-famous political scientist at the University of Chicago, who showed that around 20% of Americans think that we should actually resolve our disagreements through force. In that same survey, it showed that 74% of Americans want elected officials and others to uniformly condemn political violence and say that no disagreement should be resolved through force, but rather through coming to the table and basically peacefully resolving your differences. And that's something that you folks as leaders and people of goodwill need to reinforce every single day.
So let's sort of talk about that and dive a little deeper on that. The idea of civil discourse being so imperative to American democracy and to having this entire system work properly, that a lot of the time starts on college campuses, and it's really important on college campuses. So Congressman Krishnamoorthi, I'll go back to you because I know that you've had legislation about this. I have the name here. It's the Help Students Vote Act, which is about helping students register to vote on college campuses, but also just to have that moment of civil discourse and conversation on college campuses. Talk about why that is the important venue for these conversations to start, and if you start to have that mindset there, will those younger voters then take it with them as they grow older?
Totally. I think that, first of all, I'm so honored to be here with Bridge USA, and you folks are having very difficult conversations back at your home campuses, trying to bring people together in a very turbulent moment. So hats off to you. But you are at ground zero, in my humble opinion, of where these productive conversations need to start, where you can talk about you can disagree without being disagreeable. You can actually say, okay, you can listen as much as you talk, and you can say, where do you come from? What's your point of view on this? This is where I come from, and this is where my point of view is, and this is where we can actually work on an issue together where we agree, and then set aside some of our disagreements until we can build some trust. If we can build those types of leadership muscles, so to speak, on our college campuses, that can translate into incredible productive work long-term to help to change the discourse, to lower the toxicity levels. I'll just say one anecdote, and then I'll turn it over to Peter. When I first came into Congress, my wife told me to join the gym. And I said, okay, I'll join the gym. And then she's like, did you join the gym? Did you join the gym? I was like, okay, fine, I'll join the gym. So I joined the gym, and they assigned me to a locker, okay? And they put my name on the locker and stuff. It turns out, Peter, that my locker was right next to none other than Speaker Paul Ryan's locker. And Paul Ryan obviously is a Republican, a conservative Republican, like Peter. And I didn't know exactly how to conduct myself, but the protocol in the gym is you don't talk politics. Okay? You're supposed to talk about anything else except politics. So I learned on my first day in the gym with Paul Ryan, we came to work out at the same time, that he's a Cubs fan. And he grew up as a Cubs fan like me because that's the only channel that played in Janesville, Wisconsin. And so we talked about the Cubs every day. We talked about family every day. We started talking about other stuff. And then one day, Michael, I mustered the courage to bring up a bill that had been repeatedly stalled in the House,
Breaking
Peter.
the rules. I
was breaking protocol, but basically it was about revolutionizing our nation's skills-based education system, which is the education system for the 2/3 of Americans who don't go to college, four-year university. And so I said, Paul, this is not getting a vote. What the hell's going on? And so he said, okay, we're not supposed to talk about this, but I'll look into it. So he did, and he found out what the obstacle was. We corrected the language. It got a vote in the House and in the Senate. It got signed into law. And that all started by going to the gym.
Deal making doesn't happen in smoke-filled rooms. It happens in sweaty gyms.
It happens in gyms. It happens in places where you can find relationships. That's what, if there's one takeaway for me, for you, for all of today, is form relationships, okay? Identify your common humanity. Start from there, and then talk about other stuff. Because if you can do that, then that will withstand the test of, the partisanship and the other stuff that happens in the atmosphere.
Peter, I want to get you in, Congressman Roskam, I want to get you in on this also, just the idea of relationships. In Congress, a lot of the time those relationships are created on the House floor. The cameras aren't showing folks in the pews. That's where lawmakers can have those bipartisan conversations. Talk about the importance of those relationships and also bringing it back to the idea of it's important to harbor those conversations, that mindset of civil discourse on college campuses, because folks will take it with them as they grow older.
A couple things come to mind, Michael. One is I served in the Illinois State Senate down in Springfield, which only had 59 members. And the House of Representatives has 435 members. Now, 59 members, you're physically present with one another based on the rules of the Illinois General Assembly. You are interacting frequently on a personal level. And the net effect of that is a restraining influence about what you'll say about somebody. Because you know what? You're going to see them in 2 hours. They're going to be walking right past you, as opposed to the structure of Congress, unfortunately, right now, 435 members. I'll tell you, there were times when I wasn't sure if somebody was a member of Congress or not, because they were coming in and coming out, and if they didn't have the lapel pin that Raj is wearing today, I thought they might have been a tourist. So the physical proximity, Michael, and the physical presence with one another is a restraining influence, and I would argue a very, very good thing. But I think one of the subtexts that you as a group can communicate back on college campuses is really to intentionally resist the temptation of cynicism about our public life. Let me tell you one quick story. I was out to lunch with an old Sunday school teacher of mine, a really wealthy guy, and during the course of a discussion, I asked him, what's it like to be so rich? I'm willing to learn, but I said, what's it like to be so wealthy? Because you can write a check and your name is on the side of a building, you got all these people hustling you and so forth. And he said something, and I'm going to share it with you, that changed my attitude. And this is what he said. He said, Peter, guard your heart against cynicism. Nothing good comes from a cynical heart. He goes, if someone's manipulating me, that's their problem. That's not my problem. And when I heard that, I was about 40 years old, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it completely changed my disposition. And I think what the challenge is right now, and I think you find yourself in this milieu, cynicism is kind of cool. Cynicism is clever. Cynicism says, oh, I understand what's going on and everybody else is a fool. And yet it is dark and it is destructive and it is really, really corrosive. So as you're approaching politics and you are approaching others on campus, I would really encourage you to recognize the temptation of cynicism and to walk away. Now, I'm not here pumping sunshine. I'm not here saying, oh, this is so great, and it's like 8th grade civics. No. It's a rough and tumble arena. But the disposition and the attitude with which one approaches this can be incredibly fruitful. And I think what Raja and I are seeing today are faces and hopefully voices in a Q&A, but dispositions that say, we really want to change this. And I think you have an incredible opportunity to do so. And so don't squander this moment. Don't squander this inflection point in history where you can make an incredible difference for the long run.
I want to dive into that. This was a question I had. There was a study from UC Berkeley that says younger voters, Gen Z, millennials, they're feeling more fatalistic when it comes to the future and what the future has to hold. They're pessimistic about government's ability to solve some of their challenges. There was a quote in this study that I found striking. It said that young people have, quote, an increasing feeling of fatalism and a sense that the American dream is farther and farther out of reach. As politicians, how can you guys change that mindset? And how could these young voters themselves change that mindset? Because at such a young age, to have a fatalistic mindset about how American politics and government works, you want to be able to set the trajectory properly at that young age.
I think we got to start solving problems. We got to start actually, putting points on the board, so to speak, in terms of helping young people, but all people, with some of the basic stuff that doesn't get fixed, that needs to get fixed to improve their lives. I'll just give you a couple examples real quick, which so perhaps you know this, but I'm an immigrant. I'm one of the few naturalized citizens in Congress, and so this issue of immigration and fixing our legal immigration system is deeply personal and also professional to me. Why is it professional? 30% of my 750,000 residents, so 750,000 people, 30% of them were born outside the United States. So they come to me all the time with, I have numerous DACA folks who are trying to regularize their status. I have the children of H-1B visa holders who are trying to stay here and because they're going to age out of their status. I've got others who are just trying to work through the system, and yet it is so bureaucratic and so messed up that they are waiting in queues for decades trying to do the right thing, but they can't seem to land on their feet, and they're living in fear. So we got to fix that legal immigration system to let them to start to work on their American dream. A second issue, which bothers me a lot too, housing. Housing is through the roof in terms, sorry for the pun. It is so freaking expensive in the Chicago area, probably in your areas as well. And yet, Peter and I know one of the things that we can do to help to resolve this housing problem is make it easier to build housing. Solve the regulatory red tape that prevents multifamily housing from popping up all over our country, including, by the way, in our suburbs. It can't be that, every parcel of land can only have a single family house. When you restrict the amount of housing, then you drive up housing costs. And you don't have the chance to own a home eventually, or to build your wealth in a house, or to buy a house. So that's why I think that government starting to solve problems is so essential for lowering cynicism, and then to also get more engagement and better government over time.
Congressman Roskam, your thoughts here?
I think part of the challenge is to recognize that we are an instant gratification culture. We want what we want when we want it. And I'm right at the head of this parade. I think, though, that our system of governance is not designed to get things done quickly. It's designed to take incremental steps. And here's part of the proof of that. Thomas Jefferson was no stranger to big vision. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, obviously. And yet 14 years after he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he wrote a letter to a guy named Charles Clay, and I'm going to give you 3 lines from this letter. He said, "The ground of liberty is to be gained by inches. We need to be connected with what we can, satisfied with what we can get from time to time, and eternally press forward with what is yet to get. It takes time to persuade men to do what is for their own good." So take Raj's example. The notion of an all-or-nothing immigration remedy is a pipe dream, in my view. It's too much. It's too far. The politics of fixing it all at once are too overwhelming. And yet, you could break down part of that based on Raj's description of it to say, okay, let's settle in on DACA. Then let's talk about border security. Then let's talk about H-1B and so forth. You take my point. Break this down. And I think if your generation, if you guys, when you're back on campus, you begin to look at smaller steps that can be cumulative over time, it can be a massive impact. But the notion of saying, I'm going to get this all done instantly, and I'm not going to be satisfied unless it's all done, is setting us up for failure. So I would say incrementalism is the best approach to governance.
Another question I wanted to ask, and this may be feeding into the fatalistic outlook that some young voters have, is there's research that shows that younger Democrats are sort of feeling less connected with the Democratic Party because they're leaning more left. Younger conservatives may be feeling more disconnected with the Republican Party because they're leaning more moderate. How do politicians and political leaders go ahead with this? Do the parties need to recalibrate, or do they need to change their thinking and how they have more of a big tent and bring in some of these younger voters? Because remember, in a few years, these younger voters are eventually going to be the majority of the group. So how do political leaders react to this change in tone among younger voters?
I think you have to have a big tent. You have to bring every voice in, and you have to allow every voice to express themselves, to be able to properly reflect what folks believe, what folks want. My only humble observation is that even at the same time that we are reflective of that we get things done. What do I mean by that? I think the more that our parties, the two parties, gravitate toward the corners on any issue, it doesn't have to be progressive or super conservative, it just has to be something where they're not meeting in the middle or meeting in some place where they can actually get something done. Again, we feed into that horrible spiral where people get more cynical about government. People get less engaged in government. The reasonable, rational people say, you know what, I'm going to go spend my time doing something else instead of government because nothing can get done there. And then you know what happens? The crazies take over. And crazy is ugly. I have been there when crazy has taken over. And we're in a situation where if we allow that to happen, then, you know, it reminds me of that old Native American saying, inside of us is a good wolf and a bad wolf, and the wolf that you become is the wolf you feed. And if you feed crazy wolf, guess what happens? We have to feed the good wolf inside of each of us. We have to aspire to our greatest ideals. We have to make sure that we aspire to a country that lives up to the promise that I think all of you believe in. That's why you're here today. You're trying to form that bridge. And so that's what I try to do, even at the same time I'm listening to all the voices in my party or anybody who might disagree with me.
And Congressman Roskam, I want to give you another statistic as food for thought when you dive into this. There was a Pew Research poll back in April that found that for voters between the ages of 18 and 24, 66% lean Democrat, 34 lean Republican. So that's a 32% difference in favor of Democrats. How can the Republican Party better target these voters and bring them into the group?
Look, it's heads up. I mean, what you're describing is an incredible target of opportunity for the GOP, and they just need to be smart about it. And I think both political parties are going to be aggressively competing for your demographic because, as you pointed out, Michael, that's the future. I think that there's an opportunity strategically for you all to consider a specific role that you can play on campus, and particularly as you interact with candidates. When you interact with candidates, I think it would be a very interesting thing to inquire of them, what have you done? What have you accomplished? I'm less interested in really litigating and having a discussion about what your positions are, candidate. I'm interested in what you have gotten done. Because I would imagine, I know this because I've borne witness to this, if you were to ask that question of Congressman Krishnamoorthi, he would be able to go through a litany of things that he's been able to accomplish in a highly charged political environment. That is no small accomplishment. And yet, he's not a pushover. I mean, the man's got a worldview, he's got a way of looking at things, and he's got a disposition and an approach. But he's able to point to being able to persuade people on the other side of the aisle to vote for things that he's initiated. And I think that if that becomes a standard that you all take into the dialogue, that can be a strategic imperative where in 10 years we're having a very different conversation. And candidates aren't starting just using phrases like bumper stickers, but they're actually saying, no, hey, listen, I've been able to work with so-and-so on the other side of the aisle. We've been able to do this, that, or the other thing. I've got X number of folks on the other side of the aisle that have co-sponsored my bill, co-signed my letter. I've done all these sorts of things. That is new. That is not the way candidates are, by and large, evaluated right now. And if what comes out of this movement is a shift in disposition to say, I'm not interested in platitudes, I'm not interested in just sort of harsh phrases, but I'm interested in hearing results, or if you don't have results, what's your plan to implement this, Mr. or Mrs. Congressman, as you're trying to get this done? I think that there's a huge opportunity, Michael, for this group to make that kind of difference.
Sort of a little bit of a jump off that. You can't have a conversation about young voters without talking about social media. And I'm going to tell you, I'm Gen Z, but I had to study when writing this question. A lot of folks are right now talking about what brat means. A lot of people are talking about the Kamala Harris coconut meme. I've seen former President Trump post pictures, post videos with, where's his name? I have it right here. Jake Paul, an actor and a wrestler. He also went golfing with Bryson DeChambeau. I mean, folks are laughing, and this has gotten a lot of attention. But are these messaging tactics effective, you think, in bringing in younger voters? Because, you know, I'm Gen Z, but I'm not very online. I had to look into what this means. But a lot of folks, this translates with them, and this could get them excited and send them to the ballot box. So talk about the importance of social media, but also these memes and these different videos trying to bring in this new part of the electorate.
You're definitely Brett.
I think I'll take that as a good thing.
I think.
Okay.
So look, I think that here's my. I think it's so fun to see these Kamala memes online. I think they're so joyful. They kind of point to that energy and enthusiasm that I was talking about before, and it's refreshing. Okay. I think I have two observations about social media. One is that social media connects us in a way that perhaps we weren't able to be connected in the past. But my big concern about social media is twofold. One, I think it has, because of the algorithms that are programmed, it feeds content to people that drives them further into corners away from each other. So ironically, even though it was meant to connect people, the algorithms drive people apart. Okay, so you end up in silos online the same way that you might be in silos in society, which I think defeats the point of social media. The second is there's a lot of misinformation on social media, okay? And it could be planted by foreign state actors, or it could be domestic. But one of the things I'd like to see is I'd like to remove the loophole in Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act, sorry to get super technical, which enables big tech to essentially escape liability for false, misleading, or outright just wrong content online. That could be dangerous, okay? And big tech wants to be treated as a big community bulletin board, as opposed to being publishers, which I think they are, who should be held accountable for their content. And I know this is very controversial, but I think there are increasing numbers of lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, who want to come together on this. Hopefully, eventually we'll get to it, but that's my observation about social media, in addition to the fact that I love those Kamala videos.
I saw Congressman Eric Swalwell the other day walking down the House steps drinking from a coconut, and he was like, I'm just enjoying an afternoon refreshing snack. So people are trying to use it. Congressman Roskam?
Look, it's a real mixed bag, as Raja pointed out, and it's here to stay. Now, you have the advantage of being native in this, and which I don't. I'm calling my children constantly about how to do things, and they're very patient with me. But it's not a panacea, that's for sure. And getting back to the relationships that Raja was talking about, relationships aren't developed by shooting tweets out. Relationships aren't developed, by sitting on a corner and looking at memes on the phone. Relationships are developed by intentionally being present with one another. So I would urge you to say, yeah, listen, social media is here, social media is influential, social media is going to be a tool that we can use. But if social media itself becomes an obstacle or crowds out other time that you have to actually be intentional on campus about connecting with somebody over a cup of coffee, then I would say chuck the iPhone and spend the time with people who can really make a difference.
I'm being told we're almost out of time, so I've got one more question. It's a two-parter to end on an optimistic note. Why should the country be optimistic and excited about these young voters coming up and becoming involved in the electorate? And what's just your final parting message to them as they enter into this really important phase of life, being part of the electorate, having a vote, and having their say in American democracy?
So there's an old saying in Washington, D.C., if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And you folks cannot... I don't want any of you or your families or communities to be on the menu. So this is what I think the three things I would request you to do, okay? First, you got to vote if you're voting age. If you're voting age, you must register to vote and you must vote. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, unaffiliated, whatever, you got to vote because your vote is your voice, okay? And you don't, unfortunately, this cohort, 18 to 24, we need to have more people registering and voting, and I hope that you encourage others to do the same. Second thing, work on causes bigger than yourself. Again, it doesn't matter what it is, and I'm not saying it's a Democratic or Republican cause or whatever. Just do it because it'll be very educational for you as you learn about your community and what matters to your fellow citizens. Third is time to run for office. How many of you are thinking about it someday? Okay, good. I see a number of hands going up. I think that it's time to start thinking about that. Build up the leadership muscles. You know, work on other people's campaigns. Work on those causes that float your boat where you don't even notice time passing. And then eventually, hopefully, you'll run for office. Maybe you'll run for city council or state house or state senate. Maybe you'll run for Congress, though not in my congressional district. But hopefully you'll run, and we'll be so much better off because you were here today. You heard what your fellow students and others had to say. You met people who disagreed with you, and that enriches your service someday to our country.
Let me build on Raja's point. We are all the beneficiaries of work that people have done before us. There's another great book. It's called A History of the American People by a British historian named Paul Johnson. And he loves Americans. And he tells our story in the most beautiful way. And he says, he talks about the founders of our country. And he said, in any other generation, it would have been amazing to have one of these people on the scene. But we had dozens of them, and you know all of these names. And then he compares it to the people who were advising King George III in England, and he said the talent difference between these two groups of people, I love this phrase, was as deep as the Atlantic that separated them. Wow. That is our heritage as Americans. We, and this has been passed on from one generation to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. And so the question becomes, what do we do with this gift that has been given to us? We weren't present at the founding. We didn't come up with this. But it has been turned over from one generation to another, and now it's in your lap. And the question is, what do you do about that? Do you say, no, I can't handle it. It's too big, it's too overwhelming, or it's too tough, or I'm too overwhelmed. No. You rub some dirt on it, and you say, I'm going to deal with this, and I'm going to use this gift. I'm going to be a trustee. I'm going to be a steward of this gift, and I'm going to make sure that I am passing this on to the next generation as well. Now, I'm not here suggesting that this is easy work, but previous generations of Americans have not found this to be easy work either. We're dealing with new challenges. And these challenges of cynicism and alienation and all these other things are very real. And yet, my sense is, and I know I speak for Raja, you are clearly up to this task. And it's a great joy for us to be with you today.
Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, former Congressman Peter Roskam, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage A Starting Point co-founders Chris Evans and Mark Kassen.
We're not sure if we're awkwardly staying here, like we should leave, or...
Thank you. You're staying.
Okay, we're staying.
You're the star. Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. That was great. Hello, Congressman. Hello, Peter. How are you? All right, everybody. So this is the fun part. We're going to hand it on over to you to get your questions for our representatives. Chris, take it away.
All right, I'll take it away. All right, so our first question comes today from Jacob from NC.